I felt like this weekend we are officially back 100% normal go in the world of sports. And let me explain why I felt that way. So we've been in the middle of Little League for the last month or so. We've had Little League baseball games on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Then on Sunday, I went out to the Nashville Sounds, it's a AAA baseball stadium in my hometown of Nashville, and they have opened up that stadium. 0 mask requirement. It was the first time that I have been to a big major athletic event that is something other than a game in a gym with Little League, like Little League basketball or Little League baseball or football, flag football or soccer. My kids play all these games, so like a lot of you out there with young kids, I spend a lot of time on the ball fields, whatever, for every sport basically, depending on what the season is. So we're fortunate that all of those leagues have been full go. We've been playing basically since probably July or August in my home state of Tennessee of last year. So we've had nearly a full year of athletics, everything, like I said, basketball, baseball, flag football, soccer. We play a little bit of everything. And that has felt normal. But we're talking about normalcy being, 20 parents are there watching little kids play sports. It's not like it's a big event in any way. And I have been, and I've talked about this on the show, I went to NFL games in the fall, a bunch of them. I went to college football games. I went to college basketball games. I have been living sort of a normal existence in the world of sports, but when you went to those stadiums, it felt decidedly abnormal. There were socially distant seats, for example. Seats were zip-tied. In the Tennessee Titans Stadium, when I would go watch NFL stadiums, not only were you restricted to a particular pod of seats, but you weren't able to sit really anyone else around you. Wasn't very close, and the seats were actually zip-tied. So let's say that one of your friends also was at the game. If they came over to talk to you or you met up, as oftentimes would be the case, they couldn't just pull down a chair and sit down next to you and talk. You had to stand up. You had to have an abnormal existence. And the same thing was true for college football. The same thing was true for college basketball. Plus, you were required to have a mask on during the course of those games, and there were people who would walk around, and if you weren't in the process of eating or drinking, they would say, hey, can you put your mask back up? They had the job, right? Nobody really likes that job, but there were people in the stadium whose job was basically they were mask police to ensure that your mask was up over your face. Now, not going to dive into the universe of mask discussion right now, but I think it's fair to say it felt abnormal in many ways, even though it was enjoyable. And I would even say there were some things that weren't awful about a socially distant stadium. Namely, you could easily get to food and drink concessions. You could park easily. It was no difficulty getting in and out of the stadium. There wasn't a crush of humanity in the way that there usually is a crush of humanity inside of a stadium or an arena. So I went on Sunday afternoon. Christian Yelich, Milwaukee Brewer stud player, is rehabbing with the AAA team of the Nashville Sounds, which is where he comes down. They're the affiliate, right? So my kids, my 10-year-old in particular, wanted to go to the baseball stadium, go watch Christian Yelich. Nashville, again, my hometown, state of Tennessee as well, but on Friday the 14th, Nashville opened up and basically did away with their mask mandate. So if you are out there listening right now and you're in a state that is still very restricted and you want to go somewhere where it feels 100% normal, you can come to my state. You can come to Nashville. You can go out to all the bars, restaurants, 0 mask requirement. Some individual businesses can still have them, but the city and the state has no requirement. You can stay in hotel rooms and feel normal. You can go out and stand in front of a live band and dance and drink a beer and feel completely normal in Nashville. Well, inside the stadium too. First time that I have been to a sporting event. Took all 3 of my boys, also one of their friends. So I had 4 kids with me. Wife went as well. All 6 of us were inside the stadium, no social distancing on the seating. Everybody is sitting totally normal. Zero mask. I didn't see a single mask on anybody that was there as a spectator the entire time that I was there. Weather was glorious, absolutely perfect afternoon for baseball. And as I was sitting there watching, I thought to myself, it's over. And this happened, a lot of this did on Friday after we had already done the show on Friday. But the CDC came out on Thursday and effectively ended the mask mandate and social distancing for anybody who's been vaccinated. But you can't tell who's been vaccinated and who has not been, which means effectively there's no way to tell. And the mask mandate is over, and so is the social distancing mandate. And by the way, COVID cases are continuing to plummet. There were the smallest numbers since I think all the way back in like April of last year going on right now, right? So I believe, and what I was going to say is, Walmart came out on Friday and said they were doing away with their mask mandate. A lot of other places did as well. Trader Joe's, which has a liberal reputation, Costco, Publix, a lot of your big retailers essentially followed Walmart's lead. And I think a lot of people, frankly, because Walmart is so big and so many people go inside of Walmart stores on a day-to-day basis, I think Walmart is, for many people, sort of the default way to judge how things are going. And in many different communities. So when Walmart came out and said, hey, the mask mandate is over, some of you probably are listening to me right now, and this is the first time that you've heard it, and there certainly are still city and some state regulations that are somewhat different, but I think the vast majority of you listening to me in all 50 states, if you go to your local Walmart, you no longer have to wear a mask. And the same thing could be true of Publix, I believe, of Trader Joe's, of Costco, wherever you might go on a regular basis. Now, I'm not a shopper, so I primarily go to restaurants if I'm going to go in somewhere that had a mask mandate. Costco is probably the only place that I go regularly shop, and by regularly, I mean maybe every 6 weeks or so I'm in a Costco. I love that store. I like to walk in. I like to fantasize about buying, I'm going to get that 90-inch television. You always stop right in front of the televisions and just like kind of gaze upon them like ancient man did with a fire. You're like, man, that they just keep getting the televisions do larger and larger. We're up to like, I think they're like 90. Eventually everybody in America is going to basically have a movie screen in their house. You remember when it used to be a huge deal when you saw that first flat screen television, for those of you who are old enough to remember it, and you just looked at it, especially if you're a sports fan, and the HD quality was so unbelievably captivating that you thought to yourself, I have to get one of those. And now we're all so used to it, and it's hard to even think about what standard definition television used to resemble. But it was sort of a, oh my God moment for a lot of us who are old enough to remember that transition between standard definition and high definition and how much better the quality was. And so I still, when I walk into Costco, a part of me just stands in front of those flat screen televisions because I remember at 25 or 26 years old or whatever the heck I was, I think I was maybe 27 or 28, when I bought the first flat screen television and put it in my house, how incredible that felt. And they used to be super expensive. I think my flat screen television, not like we had the best one, but I think it was like $2,000. And that's a lot of money, especially when you didn't have very much money. That was one of the biggest purchases, other than a car, one of the biggest purchases you could make. And so when you have that first flat screen television in your house, this is 15 years ago or whatever it is, you would look at it. And then sort of Costco every year, the prices just kept plummeting and the televisions kept getting bigger and better and everything else. So I don't go into a lot of retail establishments, but I think for many of you, the fact that Walmart and Costco and Trader Joe's and Publix and all these different major retailers have effectively ended their mask mandate, it's going to be, I think, a wild and crazy summer. And on top of going to that baseball event, again, minor league stadium, AAA, no mask requirement. They didn't even ask to see a mask when you walked in. I think we had Barrett Sallee on last week, and he was saying, yeah, the Atlanta Braves have 100% capacity, but you have to have a mask on when you walk in, and then you can take it off, and nobody really asks about it. They're not even doing that cosmetic theater charade anymore. in at least the Nashville Sounds, the AAA stadium. So it was, I thought, a deep breath, we're finally back to normal moment using sports as the proxy. And then on Saturday, in my part of town where I live, in our neighborhood, they had live music, a band outdoors. We had fabulous weather on Saturday. 4 different bands came. They had a stage set up. Over 1,000 people were present for that. I tweeted out a video of it. And I believe we are through and done with COVID. I think COVID is over. Now, there's still going to be battles. Who's going to get vaccinated? What places are going to require masks? I think some cities and maybe some states are going to continue to be more draconian than others. But effectively, COVID is over as a major issue in terms of impacting most people in this country, I believe. And I'll use as an example here, Texas, which is one of our biggest states, obviously. The governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, tweeted out on Sunday night, today Texas reported 0 COVID-related deaths. And I'm reading from his tweet. The only time that's happened since data was tracked in March of 2020. The fewest COVID cases in over 13 months. The lowest 7-day COVID positivity rate ever. The lowest COVID hospitalizations in 11 months. Thanks, Texans. Why is this significant? Well, you'll remember the Texas Rangers opened up their stadium on April the 5th to 100% fan capacity, and basically nobody's wearing masks. And then they had over 70,000 people present a week ago in Jerry Jones's stadium, the AT&T Stadium there in Arlington, Texas, for the Canelo Alvarez-Billy Joe Saunders fight. And we now have had massive events going on in Texas with virtually no issues whatsoever to speak of, as cases have continued to plummet. And to the extent that people pay attention to the daily numbers that are out there, yesterday on the Worldometer site, if you still track it, there were only 17,834 new cases of COVID that were announced anywhere in the country. That is the lowest number, I believe, going all the way back to May of last year. So, I mean, maybe even April. I'm looking at the chart right now. I need an expert on the daily new cases numbers, but I'm going through here, and it may be all the way back to I think it's going all the way back to basically to March. But since we've had numbers that were reported that low, so effectively this thing is over. And I think the CDC announcement of no masks and social distancing for those people who are vaccinated. Dub, you also are active more so than I am because you're a younger guy. But I mean, it's like Las Vegas all over the city of Nashville, right? People are out. You would have never known that COVID was an issue and ever existed already.
Yeah, it is back to complete normalcy. I'm looking at the 7-day rolling average in the city of Nashville. 37 new cases on average over the past 7 days. So people see this data. Most of them have already been, or a good portion have already been vaccinated, and things are opening up, and it's back to normal, and it's awesome. I mentioned last night I was going home. Last night I went out to dinner, and I was coming home and driving down to Mumbrian Street, and it was just packed wall to wall.
Yeah, not a surprise. Like just absolutely swarmed with people everywhere. And I think, again, we're going to continue to have battles because for a lot of people, mask wearing has become a statement of their identity. I really do mean that. I mean, it is an opportunity to tell people about yourself, almost like a hairstyle, almost like a tattoo, your clothing choices that you are making. You are, in many people's mind, sending a message when you wear a mask. And so I think there are going to be certain cities, certain states, certain people who are going to cling to the idea of wearing masks, sometimes even when they're working out, as a point of pride because it is a cosmetic statement for them about their larger identity. But I think for most people, it is just what I see. People are completely over the idea of masks. And I'm going to be honest with you. I hope I never wear a mask in order to go into any business for the rest of my life. I mean, I don't like the concept of the mask. Now, I did it, right? I would carry one in my pocket. I would drive around with one in my drink holder in my car. And if I knew that I needed to put one on, but I always found the rationale for it to me was incredibly dumb. And I've said this for a long time. If I'm walking into a restaurant and I have to put a mask on in order to walk 8 steps to my table and then I can immediately take it off, what kind of stupid cosmetic charade are we undertaking here? And I felt the same way about going to games outdoors. Why should I wear a mask when literally I'm socially distanced already and no one is remotely near me when I'm outdoors? It didn't make logical sense to me. And by the way, the data reflects that never made logical sense either, that there was no justification for it. And so with summer officially here and everybody who was an adult that wants to be vaccinated, now I think it's open for almost every 12 to 15-year-old if people are super nervous about teenage age kids. All of this, to me, is sending an important message. Everything should be 100% open. And I'm curious how quickly this is going to happen. And I'll talk about this a little bit because we have been debating it on this show quite a bit. Now that the NHL playoffs are underway, and now that the NBA playoffs are going to be underway with the play-in games on Tuesday and Wednesday, a part of me wonders whether sports are going to be an important marker for getting things back normal indoors in those stadiums and arenas, because there's a huge advantage if you are able to play in front of a mostly full crowd compared to other teams that may not be able to play in front of a mostly full crowd. So how exactly is all of that going to shake itself out? I think that is a massive question that remains to be seen. But I think for much of the country, and I can't speak for everywhere, but I know where I am in the state of Tennessee, in the SEC footprint, where obviously there are a ton of interest in sports, whether it's Texas, Tennessee, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, all of those places. There's not going to be any vaccine passport required, and everybody is able to go already to games without masks, and I can't imagine that that's going to be very much different as things continue to go forward. When we come back, we will talk a little bit about the NBA and the NHL playoffs and some of the challenges that still are out there as the NBA and the NHL playoffs are going to have non-traditional, I think it's fair to say, different vibes and different feels for their playoffs than typically would be the case. We'll discuss that a little bit more. We'll continue to break down everything going on in the world of sports. That is still to come. I appreciate all of you hanging out with us. I hope you had a fantastic weekend. Again, for me, and I know some people disagree, but for me, it was an incredible feeling to be in a sporting event, AAA baseball stadium, totally normal. If you looked around from where you were seated, you would have never known that COVID ever had existed. That is what I've been waiting for in the world of sports, an experience where everything is back to 100% normalcy, and we were there on Sunday. Fabulous day for my family and I in that AAA baseball stadium. When we come back, we'll talk the NBA playoffs, which are now set, as well as the NHL playoffs, which are now underway, and some of the interesting angles associated with those playoffs. Going to be joined, by the way, Chad Withrow in Hour 2, Bobby Barak in Hour 3. Those are our guests. This is the Monday edition of OutKick on Fox Sports Radio.